Missy Mazzoli es una artista-compositora nacida en 1980 en Pensilvania, Estados Unidos. Innovadora en la ópera, ha logrado una forma innovadora de crear, la mezcla de lo clásico que contiene el ámbito operístico y la música contemporánea. Mazzoli ha logrado crear su identidad artística a través de la preparación. Se formó en instituciones importantes como la Universidad de Boston, la Universidad de Yale y el Real Conservatorio de La Haya. Entre sus obras más destacadas se encuentran las óperas Song from the Uproar 2012, como un encargo de la Ópera de Filadelfia, la Nacional de Noruega y la Lírica de Chicago, Breaking the Waves 2016 y Proving Up 2018, creadas de la mano del libretista Royce Vabrick. Sus piezas han sido alabadas por la crítica del Washington Post. Se logró colocar como una de las mejores óperas del siglo XXI. Missy Mazzoli actúa ante las condiciones del entorno que la rodea. Durante mucho tiempo le tocó ser la única mujer en una sala de ensayo, así que desde su posición artística y como profesora, en instituciones como Conservatorio de Música del Colegio Bard, Colegio de Música Mannes, National Sawdust, entre otros, ha materializado la creación de Luna Composition Lab, institución que apoya a mujeres y personas no binarias en la composición musical. Se ha encargado de fomentar la igualdad de género, la inclusión y la transformación cultural dentro del mundo de la ópera, un espacio históricamente dominado por hombres. Es una de las figuras actuales más importantes de la música clásica. Fue nominada al Grammy y es una de las primeras mujeres comisionadas por la Ópera Metropolitana de Nueva York.
¿Qué tal, amigas y amigos de TV UNAM? Soy Gerardo Kleinburg y quiero darles la bienvenida a esta emisión de nuestra serie Pensadores Contemporáneos. Hoy nos vestimos de gala porque tenemos la presencia de Missy Mazzoli. Missy Mazzoli es una de las compositoras más importantes en nuestro tiempo. Está invitada como parte del Festival Cultura UNAM, en el que haremos nada más y nada menos que la premiere en América Latina de su ópera Breaking the Waves, rompiendo las olas, basada, como bien se pueden imaginar, en la película homónima de los años 90 de Lars von Trier. Es parte de nuestro festival y es un privilegio, de verdad, poder tener aquí a la compositora y preguntarle todo lo que se nos ocurra acerca de ella y de su ópera. Missy, welcome to Mexico. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And as I told you before, thanks for having written this opera. It's an incredible opera, and I'm sure everyone will enjoy it. I'm not sure the word is enjoy. We'll suffer with it a lot. That's it. I would like to structure our conversation in two parts, if you agree. The first one will address you and your career, and the second will focus on your opera Breaking the Waves, which will premiere as part of this edition of the Festival Cultura UNAM. So let me start by asking you, where do you see yourself as a composer? What would you say are your main stylistic coordinates?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think that I'm the worst person to describe my own music because I'm completely inside of it. And I think with each piece, I'm trying to create something new. So I'm not trying to fit neatly into any genre or style or group of people. You know, it's really trying to invent something that is completely my own. That said, I do have a lot of influences. I'm very influenced by American music. I'm American, I live in America. And I am influenced very much by the minimalists, so like Philip Glass, Steve Reich, Meredith Monk, and sort
Adams?
Sure, yeah. And all in different ways, and also not only their music, but the way that they interact with the world, and they were starting their own ensembles, starting their own companies, really being proactive and making a music scene that served them and other people. So stylistically, I'm somewhere in there, but I'm also very much influenced by popular music. I studied jazz piano as a kid, so there's a little bit of that in there. But it's really, and I also am taking influences from, the Baroque or from opera.
Baroque.
So,
okay.
From Verdi and Puccini, and these are. I studied them in order to learn how to write opera. So there's a lot of different mixes of influence in there.
When I speak with singers, I usually ask them, do you like to sing, besides singing being a job? And what do you sing when you sing? Because you just want to sing. And I'm asking you this same question. Do you listen to music? Which music do you listen? When you listen to music with no purpose at all, just taking a shower, driving, what do you listen to?
Yeah, I mean, I love like punk and new wave punk rock. I just went to see Swans in New York, this like new wave band. It's very like, it's an experience, and these songs that go on for 15 minutes, and they're extremely loud. And yeah, so I'm listening to a lot of that, a lot of like contemporary music, a lot of like popular music, Bad Bunny, Beyonce, all of it, yeah.
That sounds great. It's also inevitable to ask you how you perceive the present and the future of women composers, both in the field of instrumental music and in opera. In which ways has the situation for a woman who wants to become a composer or who already is a composer has changed?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, things have changed a lot, particularly in the last 20 years. Actually, I mean, in the last century. And to a degree, things have really opened up for female, non-binary creators. But it's still the numbers are not great for us. The statistics, I always go back to the statistics, and I know that around the world, just around 5 to 7% of works played by major orchestras last year were written by people who are not men.
All around the world. And if we consider contemporary music by composers who are alive, does that statistic
Sure,
change?
and when you just look at the contemporary music, it hovers around 20% of when it's living, you just consider living composers. So, for women who make up 51% of the population, that just shows me that there's somewhere in the system that is breaking down for women and that is not supporting female creators to the same degree. I think it's complicated in that I think that there are many points at which it breaks down. I think there's not a lot of support given to very, very young female composers, and there's also not a lot of support given at the very top end. I mean, the Metropolitan Opera just commissioned its first 2 women, myself and Janine Tesori, in 2018, and that they're not alone, so I think there are a lot of opera companies where I show up for a premiere of one of my works and they say, you're the first woman we've ever programmed. And I'd be like, it is 2015 or it is 2024. It is like, this should not still be happening. And I think that opera is a particularly hard hurdle to get over for female composers. Not that it's hard to write, but it's hard to sort of break in the system, because it's such a massive work, and you have to have a company that is trusting you to do something. And it's one thing to have someone premiering an orchestral work that exists, but to have them commission you to write a new story that's going to cost $1 million to put on, and that has a lot of unknowns is something. It's not an opportunity that a lot of women are given.
Do you really think being a woman is still an issue? I mean, if you find a work, either you program it or not, would you say the gender issue is still something people consider?
Absolutely.
Really?
Well, I mean, and the statistics are the proof of that. So if that wasn't, if there wasn't an issue somewhere in the system, whether it's in the educational system very early on, or whether it's in programming at a big opera company or at an orchestra, then the numbers would reflect society, and it would be 50% female, would be 17% in America, like 17% Black composers, and those aren't the numbers that we see, and so that means that something is going wrong.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
You already mentioned this, but I would like to go a little bit further. Few countries in the world are such a melting pot of musical styles and influences as the United States, from every tradition and nationality. What kinds of music outside of what we usually call classical music have really influenced your work? Why and in what way have they done so?
Sure. I mean, I was very lucky. Like as a student, I was exposed to a lot of different kinds of music from around the world. I played Balinese gamelan when I was in college. Just the other day, I saw a world premiere from William Kentridge, the South African director in New York City, that had music by two South African composers as part of it. And so I feel very lucky to be not only, in America in the melting pot sense, but in New York, where I'm able to see a lot of different work. Certainly, music, all this music sort of influences me, not that I'm appropriating it, but that it works its way into my DNA. Like the way of making music in Bali was very influential to me. The idea that, you follow a leader, follow a drummer, that there are certain beat patterns that are groups of 7 and 13. It wasn't just 4 and 4 and 4. That really opened up my ears in particular.
Have you been familiar with Latin American music? Or not?
Yeah, a little bit, but not as much as other cultures, I will admit.
You're here because we're doing an opera written by you. How do you relate to the human voice, to singing? What is your approach to this incredible and so particular instrument as a composer? What are the main risks involved in writing for the voice, according to you?
Sure. Well, it's interesting because I'm not a singer at all. Like I can't sing at all. And
we share that.
It's okay. But I think as a result of that, I committed myself to studying the voice, and I actually took voice lessons, 15 years ago when I was composer in residence at Opera Philadelphia, just to learn, not to be able to sing, but to learn how vocal production works. So I have tremendous respect and admiration for singers because their body is their instrument, and that is very portable, but is but
also fragile.
So fragile and so psychological. So it was really stunning to learn how the psychology of voice affects your vocal production. If you're feeling nervous, your voice clenches up, and just that there's no barrier between you and the audience. And I'm used to hiding behind a piano, hiding behind a big stand, if I'm conducting or something. But that directness is very.
You said conducting?
A little bit, yeah.
Well, talk about that.
Or even, and your back is to the audience. It's you're sort of protected, but with singers, it's very vulnerable. But all of my music really at its core is about human beings and about human struggles. So when I started writing opera, it was like coming home, and it was like I thought, oh, this is what I've always been supposed to do, is work in the theater, work with people, telling human stories.
That's beautiful. How do you think contemporary music relates to the human voice? It has been frequently said that it sometimes mistreats it. Would you agree with that?
Do you mean that contemporary music mistreats?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, most composers are trying to do something new. And so I think that when you're trying to do something that has never been done before with a human instrument, you're going to take it to some extremes. And I think some of those can be beautiful and some of those can be hard on the voice. But I will say, so many contemporary techniques that were considered extreme or even dangerous 50 years ago are now common. And every student at a university, I'm thinking of the music of Ligeti or Thomas Adès. This music is very, very difficult, but people... students are now playing it, and it's just that the level ramps up. And the same is true with voice, is that techniques that were unthinkable on the Met stage are now being embraced by singers, and you have to do it in a healthy way. That no one wants singers to destroy their voice in order to sing a work. That doesn't make any sense. But it's exciting that it's opening up.
When you write for a violin, you never talk with the violin and ask him if he's okay with what you're writing with.
Yeah.
How does it work with the human voice? When you write for the human voice during rehearsals, are you open to discuss when a singer tells you maybe this is not quite the best for the boys. How do you work that?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, and the great thing about making opera is you have lots of workshops. So I get to try things out before it appears on the stage. And so many of those workshops are working with singers. I was just emailing a singer now. It's like that when we're going to get together on Zoom and go over a part that I'm writing for him. And yeah, and I think if there's a problem, there's always, my job is to find a creative way to solve that. It can't be like, oh, you have to do this, even if it's painful, even if it sounds terrible. It's like, it's my job to think of a creative solution for every problem.
Because sometimes they not only say, well, this is not wrong, but this is quite not the best idea. But sometimes they might give you an idea. Are you open are you open to accept an idea from them?
Oh yeah, totally. Sometimes they might say, oh, if we do this a third higher, my voice rings out. And it's like, great, let's do it. So there's a lot of that. It's a collaboration.
Before talking specifically about your opera, Breaking the Waves, I'd like us to discuss a little bit about the current state of concert music and opera in general. After a vertiginous second half of the 20th century, when music, driven by technological advances, European avant-gardes, and the final collapse of old musical canons, reached truly radical extremes and distanced itself from a large part of its traditional audience, the 21st century seems to have marked a strong shift. It feels as though the pendulum has begun to swing back in the opposite direction. Resources and languages from the past seem to have returned, though in much more elaborate forms. Tonal language, for instance, has regained significant ground. Would you agree with this view? How do you explain the evolution of music during the 21st century, its relationship with audiences, performers, musical institutions such as orchestras and opera houses?
That's a huge question.
I know.
It really is, and it's so contentious, and it can be contentious, and every composer has their little camp and that they're in. But I do think that I'm happy that in the last part of the 20th century, a lot of this sort of isolationism is breaking down. So even when I was in school, 20 years ago, you were encouraged to sort of find your camp. Like either you were a modernist or you were a minimalist or you were a jazz person. And everyone was kind of. And then at a certain point, I feel like everyone was like, why are we doing this? And especially, in America, and I think in a lot of places around the world, the arts are really suffering financially. It's very hard to have easy support for particularly works that are avant-garde or that are contemporary at all. And so I think composers really started to unite and realized, and this is all in my experience, like in the last 20 years, that creating a good musical ecosystem that lifts up everybody, and it is more important than sort of saying, your work doesn't matter because you have major chords, or, this work is the only work that matters because it's avant-garde or 12-tone or whatever sort of stylistic camp you find yourself in. So I do feel, from my perspective, it's really breaking down, and that is great.
But do you think it went too far? Let me tell you my experience as a music lover, trained in traditional music. And then when I started to realize there were other kinds of music, contemporary music, I suffered a lot. I didn't like it. I thought it was not music. I struggled a lot. And finally, I was able to reach that music and to enjoy that music. And now it seems it's going the other way. So do you think it's really going back to tradition? Or not exactly that way? Like neo-Roman, everything is neo.
Yeah. No, I don't think, do you mean, do I think composers are going back to a more traditional?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I don't think so at all. And when I say, I think that composers are now and always have been writing in a huge variety of styles. And I think when we look back at history and we say, oh, this particular style was the dominant one in the 1980s or the 90s, it's a myth. Because if you look at concert programs in let's say New York in the 1980s and 90s, there was Boulez right up next to Philip Glass, John Corigliano. It's like complete, it was always very diverse and always, there was always a lot of stylistic diversity going on. So it's only sort of in retrospect that we kind of say, oh, this was the defining style. And I think so now I think composer, I'm just thinking of my friends who I know in New York. We have someone like Marcos Balter, who is a professor at Columbia and writing in what I would call for lack of a better term, like a more avant-garde modernist style, but also combining his Brazilian influence from where he grew up. And then there's Anna Thorvaldsdottir from Iceland, who's writing these like glacial landscape works that are, about the native ecology of Iceland. And myself, who's using tonality and rhythm, but sort of twisting it, turning it on its head. So it's both familiar and surprising at the same time. And then you have people who are writing just, very straight ahead, more like neo-romantic music. And everyone's kind of peacefully coexisting. Okay. And I think that I don't think that it's a return to a neo-romantic style for everybody. I think it's more the realization that these are all connected and everyone's learning from each other and inspired by each other. I'm very inspired by musicians who sound nothing like me. So a composer like Thomas Eddes, again, Anna Thorvaldsdottir, John Luther Adams. These are artists who you wouldn't put our music is very, very different, and we have a very different approach, but I'm always learning from them.
I was going to ask you, where do you think it's heading to? But it's inevitable to talk about technology. It's inevitable to talk about artificial intelligence. Are you fond of it? Are you afraid of it? Are you using it? Is it a tool? Is it a threat? How do you think? Nobody knows what's going to happen. But how do you think it will influence you?
I mean, I think since I am often hired to create something totally new, I have to, cross my fingers and knock on wood that my job will not be taken by artificial intelligence. I do think, though, that it is a big problem for, let's say, composers writing in film and TV work, where you're asked to create something that mimics a certain style, or you're asked to do something that is less sort of attention grabbing in certain cases. You're asked to support a narrative, and in that work might be easier to implement AI. I have not heard a lot of great AI music.
It's awful.
So far it's really bad. But you know what? A year ago, the images that AI created were very, very bad too.
Can you tell it's AI?
AI music? I like to think so, but who knows? But the things that I've heard that I know are AI are not great. And I also we'll probably watch this interview in a year and say, oh, now I'm using AI all the time, but I don't see a purpose for it in my work. I'm already using technology in a lot of different ways. I'm using electronic processing. Even my notation software has what are essentially AI tools in it, so I can save time with orchestration. And it's just a matter of not sitting there as a scribe and putting in every note. It's like you can sort of get it to predict what you're going to do in a way that does not limit the creativity and originality of it at all. So who knows? But I don't feel that, my very specific narrow niche is threatened at this point.
I'm sure it's not. Now let's turn a little bit to your opera, Breaking the Waves. First of all, I want to say that UNAM and Festival Cultura UNAM are truly happy, as I mentioned at the beginning, and excited to present its premiere in Mexico and in Latin America. It's a remarkable work, powerful, moving, and deeply engaging for both performers and audiences. In my opinion, it masterfully blends text, music, and the adaptation of the film. I know everyone has asked you this, but I need to ask you again. Tell us, please, how did the idea come about, and how did you become involved in the project?
Sure. Well, I was composer in residence at Opera Philadelphia, and they commissioned a new work from me in 2013. And I had worked on one opera before with the librettist Royce Favrick. And so I went to him and I said, will you work on this with me again? And also we should think of a subject, what is this opera going to be about? And he suggested an adaptation of Breaking the Waves. And I initially said no, because I loved the film. I think it's an amazing film, and I wasn't sure at that point what opera could add to it. And also I was kind of scared by the intensity of the experience, and that as a composer, you have to sit with this piece alone for many years.
And as a woman.
And it felt very intense to take on that alone. But the more so I said no, but then after a couple of weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about it and like what we could do on the stage with this subject and this story. And so I eventually said yes. I'm so glad I did, because it's a piece that has really gone everywhere in the world and taken us all around the world.
What about Lars von Trier in the process? Did he somehow get involved? Did you meet him?
No, we never, we didn't meet him. We haven't met him yet. He doesn't fly. So he didn't come to the premiere, which was in America. But he gave us his blessing, which we were very grateful for.
Really?
I mean, we purchased the rights.
Has he seen it?
He's seen a video.
Okay.
Yeah. Which he said nice things about in the press once, and I died of happiness. But he's very gracious in letting us adapt it. And I know that opera is very, very far from his aesthetic, and it just kind of by definition. But we were very grateful that he let us work with the story.
I'm happy to hear that. Why did you decide to take part in the project of turning such a successful film into an opera? Was it precisely because of that success? Couldn't one actually think the opposite, that if the film is already excellent, why take the risk of adapting it? Of course, in your case, the risk was more than justified. The opera is also truly exceptional. Why taking that huge risk?
It didn't feel like a risk at the time. I mean, there are certain risky things about it. This is a controversial film, but it was also named one of the best films of the 90s by Roger Ebert. So it's also sort of a classic, but it's not a movie that everyone has seen. So I would say in every audience, probably 30 to 40% of people have seen the film, and the other,
you're right,
whatever percentage has not. And so we wanted to create something that was very different from the film and that didn't depend on people having seen the film. Like you can go to the opera without having seen the film and still enjoy it and understand it.
What attracted you, seduced you from the story? I asked you in the morning, what is this story about? What is Breaking the Waves about?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is, Royce, my librettist, and I also, we always say about opera that it is a place for big ideas, and it is a place for grand gestures. And I'm sure there are some great operas made about like people making breakfast or like walking to work, but I just can't imagine that. I think it's a place where, this is the place where we talk about love and fate and destiny and murder and betrayal. I mean, this is a place for big ideas. So, and Breaking the Waves is a film about big ideas. Lars von Trier himself said that this was a film about goodness and what it means to be a good person. And I think that it's also a film about the nature of faith, the nature of loyalty. And above all, this is really, for me, about the experience of being a woman, which is in part about having everyone around you telling you what to do and how to act, and then having to make your own decisions based on your own internal compass in the end. And that is exactly what Bess, our main character, does. So all these big ideas, I mean, these were all part of the piece, and I think gave me room as a composer to explore the psychology of the characters through the music. There was space in the film. I think also because there's not a score to the film. There's some sound and some music in the film, but it's really like interstitial. There's not an underlying score. So that gave me space to put my own stamp on it musically too.
I was telling you in the morning that you are, according to me, the first woman involved in a creative way with this story, with Breaking the Waves. Lars von Trier is a man. His co-Liberty screenplay is a man. Royce is a man, and now there is you, a woman involved in such an important way in the opera. Does it make a difference? Can your music make a difference coming from a woman to portray this woman just with music? Is it possible to do it just with music?
I think so. I mean, look, as a composer, like you are, I don't want to say in charge because I don't want to diminish, opera is a collaborative art form. But as a composer, you're deciding the timing, you're deciding the emotional tone, you're deciding sort of where the audience is looking and focusing to a great extent. So I felt that, as a woman, I felt that I had the right to take this perspective on the story. It's a story written by a man, and which I think is fine. I think a man can write a very sensitive story about the experience of being a woman. Obviously completely possible.
Sure, I agree.
But I think that, this is my interpretation of this, in that, again, a woman's experience of having everyone telling her what to do and all telling her different things is born out of my own experience. It's a reflection of my own experience and the experience of every woman in my family who feels the same way. So I think, I don't think it's essential to have, I don't think that only women can tell women's stories. But I think if also, on the other hand, if you're finding yourself like telling that if a woman is at the center of a narrative and you're trying to say something deep about the female experience, then like it's weird to have only men tell that story. It makes me think of American government, which is,
Of all examples.
And I would say that in the case of Lawrence von Trier and the movie version of Breaking the Waves, that Emily Watson is the storyteller, so, and her interpretation of this role, and if you read back to the story of her audition for this role, had a huge impact on the creation of this character. So I would argue that she is sort of a co-author in this as well. But I don't think it's necessary, for example, to always have a woman direct it, because I think that men can be very sensitive to this experience too.
I agree. This question goes a little bit further. It doesn't only have to do with music, but to the creation of the opera as a whole. The film has a very direct cinematic language, handheld camera, almost documentary style. How do you, as a composer, translate that hyperrealism into an operatic language that is by nature more symbolic and stylized?
Yeah, well, I think from the beginning we decided that we were creating something very different from the film. We were not trying to recreate the film, and that would be really impossible. And the big question, even in our first meetings, was how do we recreate this intimacy that von Trier creates through the extreme close-ups of usually of people's faces, and just this, you feel like you are standing right here as two people are having a conversation in the film. It's really close. And how do you do that on a stage that is like, 600 meters away from someone, and it's like a football field away from someone who's sitting in the last row. And we decided that the aria is sort of a moment for the close-up. So the opera begins with an aria sung by Bess. She's alone on stage in most stagings. Doesn't have to be, but she's generally, the idea is that she's alone and that we're the only ones in the room with her. So our goal was that everyone in the audience felt like they were the only person witnessing this.
Okay.
And I think you can do that with an aria. And certainly other things in the music that I'm doing are meant to sort of make the audience lean in and listen closer and create a sort of intimate sound.
Bess is one of the most complex female characters in modern cinema, and now, thanks to you, in modern opera. How did you construct her musically and textually? Tell us a little bit about her music and about Jan's music, for instance, and about the chorus, because I think it's a very important role. Tell us about those three roles in musical terms.
Sure. My goal with creating these characters on stage is that they all have different musical identities, and that they're very distinct. So I think that, Bess's music is a combination of her innocence and strength. I wanted to portray this really strong female voice at the very beginning of the opera, but she's also very young. She's 23 years old. The character is about 23 years old. And is living in a very isolated religious community. So there's a certain naivete that goes along with her as well. And so portraying that through the music. So how does this happen? So there's a lot of winds and clarinets. There's also a lot of strings and a lot of glissandi, so where the strings are sort of in the spaces between the notes, which creates a sense of playfulness but also uneasiness. For Jan, there's a more confident sound. He's an older man. He's probably 20 years older than she is, and has a more worldly sort of sound to him. And then the chorus is usually portraying either the sort of sinister councilman in the church, or maybe not sinister, but stern, or they're playing the voice of God. So Bess has these conversations with God where God sort of speaks back to her, and the chorus is sort of activated in that way. So sometimes they're whispering, sometimes they're chanting, sometimes they're acting like a sort of gossiping society where they're creating a sort of na-na-na-na-na-na sound. They're not saying words, but they're the idea is that the town is listening. So there's ways to, I think that was really fun music to write, was this choral music that brings this town to life.
Missy, your music blends the tonal and the somewhat dissonant worlds, the sensual and the aesthetic. How did you find the balance between beauty and, let's say, crispness in this score?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that is a hallmark of I would say my style, is that, I'm trying to bring in an audience by presenting sounds that are familiar. So like a major triad or a very simple melody, but it's presented in a strange context. So it might be surrounded by notes that are not in that key, or there might be like a distant rumbling underneath it that sort of undermines the security of that sound. So I think that that's present in a lot of my music, and then operatically, it makes a lot of sense because there's this like sense of unease in this whole opera. So you might have someone singing a line that is very much in a key, or that outlines, again, a major triad, but then there's like one dissonant note in the bass, very soft, and so it creates a sense that all is not solid. And that the foundation of this story is not solid. That people something bad will happen, essentially. But yeah, I do that with not only I'm as a pianist, I'm very much interested in harmony, and I usually start my music by building chords, and then working from there.
Great. I've been always fascinated by the work of a composer, by the work of a librettist, but it's even more fascinating the work of them together, working, discussing, arguing, reaching agreements. You've worked together with Royce, the librettist of Breaking the Waves, before. What would you say was unique about your collaboration in Breaking the Waves? What did you learn from each other in this specific process?
Yeah, well, Breaking the Waves is really the first big opera that either of us had done. I mean, Royce had worked on Dog Days with David T. Little, but like Breaking the Waves was sort of like, it was really big scale, and it was a big leap for us artistically. So we were talking about it all the time. We live about a mile away from each other in Brooklyn, in New York City, and we're always hanging out and always, going to see shows together, going to see theater together. And so we were in constant dialogue about this piece for years. And some of our best ideas came like in the back of taxis, coming back from something else, and be like, oh, do you think in this scene we should do this? And so I think that the strength of our collaboration is that we're constantly in dialogue, and that we're also really, really flexible, and we don't cling to any one part of our output. So I won't, the music and the words have to work together. And so Royce will never say, oh no, it has to be this text. Like if the text is not working, then it has to change. And the same thing with the music.
Okay, I can follow you regarding very specific points in the opera. But about the big structure, for instance, how did you decide to structure it as a whole?
Yeah. Well, the film is in, I think, like 17 different little chapters.
Yes, that helped.
Yeah, but we decided that we wanted to sort of condense it into a 3-act structure. And where each one would show the sort of deterioration of Bess, and then she's finally sort of transcends at the very end, but that it would open with a different state of sort of distress. So the second act opens with her in the hospital right after her husband has been injured. The third act opens with her going back home after she has, gone out and been with other men, and her mother is yelling at her. So we knew that we had those pillars in place for the structure. And then Royce did a heroic job of cutting a lot out. You have to cut so much out. Yeah. Because if we were to set every line in the screenplay, it would be a 7-hour opera at least. Because when you sing, everything stretches out. It takes more time. So he made some really great decisions about what needed to be there and what could go. Yeah.
Our festival, this festival, has some axis within it. For instance, art as a political action, culture of peace. Concerning these subjects, Breaking the Waves confronts the symbolic and moral violence of a closed community. Do you believe that opera can really be a form of political action? Would you like to do an opera, or are you planning to do, or have you written an opera really involved with politics specifically?
Yeah. Yeah, again, a big question. I do think that opera is part of a piece of political action. I think anything can be a political action.
Every single action.
And every single person can use whatever they do to advance a certain political agenda, for better or for worse. But I think in the arts, we have that opportunity every day. And the things that I love about opera, my work doesn't really use the language of politics, so I would not have an opera that starred Donald Trump or something. Like it it's not so literal.
It would be fascinating in a certain way.
Sure, but I don't know if I'm the person to do that. Those aren't the kind of ideas that I am drawn to. I'm drawn to the more universal, timeless narrative that gets at the effect of politics on human beings. So I think that all of my operas have a really strong current of politics as one of the many layers. And for example, my opera Proving Up, which was also with Royce, is about the myths surrounding the American dream and the origins of that myth as it relates to westward expansion in the 1870s. So settlers in the East that were moving west and kicking indigenous Americans off their land. It's this very bloody, dark chapter in American history, but it's held up as this glorious time when, we were staking a claim to our land and everything was great. That's not the reality. We're working on an opera now for the Metropolitan Opera that is called Lincoln and the Bardo. It takes place again in the 1860s around the Civil War.
I was going to ask you that.
Sure. Yeah, and so that is based on a novel by George Saunders, and it has Lincoln in the title, but it's not really about Abraham Lincoln. It's the story of his son who passed away when he was 11, and it imagines this son sort of as a ghost arriving in a cemetery and being sort of awakening all the ghosts who have sort of tuned out and are sort of waiting for what we don't know, but they're sort of stuck between life and death, and this arrival of this boy and the figure of Lincoln sort of gets them to move on. And it takes place in the midst of this, obviously, of extremely divided America, even much more divided than we are now. But it has a lot of resonance with what is happening in America now. So all of these stories, like politics, affects it. It affects the decisions that Royce and I make about what subjects to turn into operas. And I think that the effect on the world. I mean, I don't think that any one single opera is going to, for example, reverse the dark path that America is on right now, or is going to, necessarily change that. But it's part of a bigger picture, and I think it's a really important tool for starting conversation and getting strangers to come together and talk about very deep personal things like fate, love, the American dream, a divided nation. This genders conversation, which I think is incredibly powerful and necessary.
I'm a little bit curious, and I'm not sure you're allowed to speak about this, but can you tell us a little bit about the cast? Who's going to do this opera at the Met? You have any ideas? Is it possible to know?
I'm not supposed to say yet. It hasn't been announced yet, but I can say that there are some really fantastic Met favorites. So some singers who usually you would see singing Wagner or Verdi.
I'm starting.
Yeah, I know. I'm giving hints, dropping hints. But and I'm really interested in writing new works for really big voices because they don't often sing a lot of contemporary music. So these singers who are sort of always the Brunhildes of the world, don't always get to sing new work, but it's such an amazing instrument. So I really enjoyed writing some of these roles for them. There's a countertenor in it.
There's a countertenor.
Yes, he's very well known, but I
can imagine who. Anyway,
too much.
Although the story, Breaking the Waves, portrays suffering and exclusion, it also speaks of compassion and redemption, I think. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that works like this can really contribute to a culture of peace by fostering empathy toward those who live or think differently?
Absolutely. I think that, it's part of a complex, bigger picture. But I've had people come up to me after performances of Breaking the Waves and say, I'm so glad I came to this because it made me remember, what my late husband went through before he died, or it made me remember what it was like to kind of leave a very insular religious community. And there's some things that are very, something like that is very related to the narrative, and some stuff was not, but it got people thinking about, again, the nature of faith, empathy, loyalty, and what it means to be a good person.
It has a little bit to do with your answer. We live in a world marked by polarization, wars, and inequality. What role do you think contemporary opera, with its blend of art, thought, and emotion, can play in helping us understand or heal our present? Why is opera so powerful, according to you? What's the secret there?
Again, every composer will have a different answer to this, but I think there's a certain magic in the fact that it is live theater, that we're experiencing it communally as an audience together in the same room, but also the performers are right there in the same room with us, enacting this often very difficult scenario right in front of us. And since Aristotle, this has been a catharsis, and this has been an important part of our culture and a necessary part of our culture. So I don't think that goes away. I think that's something very human and very deep within us that cannot be replaced by AI or Instagram or film, and even, I love all those things. I don't love AI, but I'm on Instagram. Right. I watch it's all that stuff is very important. But I think opera and live performance there's something special, really special to it in the communal nature of it.
Despite its harshness, Breaking the Waves ends with an image of transcendence. What kind of transformation, individual or collective, do you hope to spark in audiences through this opera? What would you like them to feel with this opera? Or that's not part of your intention, to make them feel something specific?
I want them to leave the theater talking to each other and being open to new emotions. I want them to say, oh, I've never seen something like that, and it's bringing up this in me. It's bringing up anger. It's bringing up sadness. It's bringing up a sense of relief. I never want to prescribe what people should. I never know how to answer the question, oh, what do you want people to get out of this opera, or what? And even what do you want them to feel? I'm not. I just want them to be open, and I want them to come out talking to each other and talking about the piece.
The film ends with bells ringing in the sky. The opera also leaves us suspended between the human and the divine. What does Breaking the Waves mean to you today, years after creating it? Not as a composer and as part of the audience, has it changed?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yes. This opera is very, very important to me personally. Just on a purely personal level, it really marked a shift for me into a sort of new era of my career. That sounds so weighty and lofty, but before this piece, I was, like many artists, struggling financially, struggling to find a forum in which to express myself and I felt that I wanted to do this on a larger stage, but that's very hard to find when you're, 25, 26. And Breaking the Waves was a real turning point. And all of a sudden I had the resources and the connections to be able to really do this. And so that just really changed my thinking, and it made me much more open in saying what I think and making work that is exactly the work that I want to make, and that is, that is sometimes edgy, that is sometimes pushing boundaries. I felt much more free to do that after Breaking the Waves. And then in the terms of the subject matter, I do think that one thing that has become increasingly relevant is this idea of bodily autonomy. Again, coming right out of politics in the U.S., abortion is now illegal in many places, or very, very inaccessible. And so when Bess sings a song called, an aria entitled "My Body is a Map," mm-hmm. Of my life, it's it takes on a new meaning. And I remember the first time after Roe versus Wade was overturned that I saw a production, I was like, oh my God, this means something completely different to me right now. So I think that there are a lot of themes in this opera that take on different meaning, depend on where you are in the world and what's going on.
Now, tell us a little bit more about you, if I may ask. How does a woman contemporary composer live? What do you do? You play. Tell us about your band. You have a band, Victoire. Tell us a little bit about other things you do besides writing incredible music.
I think that the one thing all composers have in common is that we're all doing a lot of different things. So I don't know a single composer who's just writing and that's all they do. For myself, I teach at Bard College in New York State. I also run a nonprofit that I started called Luna Composition Lab, something I founded in 2016 with the composer Ellen Reed. And it's to promote and support and provide mentorship for very young female and non-binary composers who are in their teens. So we identify them and connect them with mentors who are prominent female and non-binary mentors in the field, and then give them a year of mentorship. We perform their works. We have a big festival. And that's great. And that's a job. So I'm writing grants, I'm doing interviews, I'm finding partners. And then, I'm still performing a lot on the piano and then just writing a lot of different kinds of music.
Besides the opera you're doing at the Metropolitan Opera, tell us a little bit more about your future plans. Which kind of works are you working in?
Yeah. Royce and I are also working on a piece for the Edinburgh Festival that will open the festival this August, called The Galloping Cure, which is an opera that is also kind of based in politics. It's based around the opioid crisis in America. And it takes another lighthearted,
I know, you love
comedy.
light subjects. Well, that's a good one. That's a good one.
And both Royce and I have personal experience with losing friends to overdoses. Royce's father, succumbed to his addiction. And so this is something that is very, very real for us. It's not abstract. And we took a Kafka story called A Country Doctor, and with the help of the writer Karen Russell, have reset that in present day Pennsylvania, and in a sort of strange town where a man comes to town selling a cure for pain, and the cure is that you ride on a carousel. So the whole town becomes addicted to riding on this carousel, because it's taking away all of their pain. And you can imagine what happens, with any town that becomes addicted.
I'm loving it.
Yeah, it's very surreal and very fun. It's actually, there are a lot of fun, lighthearted moments. But in the end, it's a story about opioids and loss. And in the end, the resolve to keep going, even in a devastated landscape.
Tell us about Victoire.
Yeah, Victoire was a band that I had for many years, about 10 years. When I first moved to New York in 2007, I was really looking for a community. I was trying to situate myself within the musical community, and I also missed playing. I missed performing, and I had grown up being in punk bands. And I wanted that experience again, but with music that I would write. And so I formed Victoire, which was a group of 5 women. And we, and the instrumentation is violin, clarinet, keyboards, and double bass, and also sometimes voices. And we, made albums. We toured around the country. We ended up playing at Carnegie Hall twice. So it started in my living room where we were just playing shows for my friends.
All women, isn't it?
It's all women, yeah. And that was sort of just a nice change. I thought, I'm making music with all these guys all the time, and that is great. It's wonderful, but I wanted 20% of my music making to be with other women, and I wondered how that would change things. And it was very interesting. And they were great. They were some of my best, are some of my best friends. But yeah, and it was a great place to try out ideas. So the work was not commissioned by anyone. It was not, there was no pressure to write it. No one was asking me to write it. I just wanted to. So I just tried all these crazy ideas that then found their way into other music that I wrote.
Missy, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And I'm looking forward. In a few hours, we will be listening for the first time Breaking the Waves in Mexico. Thanks again. Amigas, amigos, muchísimas gracias por habernos seguido en esta fantástica conversación con Missy Mazzoli a propósito de su vida, de su trayectoria, de su ópera Breaking the Waves. Nos vemos en la próxima.